Aloha, welcome back to Craft Chocolate TV. This is Dylan Butterbaugh, and today we're going to do our second episode on confusing chocolate terms. And so what we're going to start with is Callets, chips, and drops. And I'm sure I'm missing a few more, but all this means are chocolate chips. When our machine dispenses chocolate, it's coming through a depositing head, and it pulses, and a certain amount of chocolate is usually could be pushed by a piston and forced out of many little holes, and it drops onto either a belt or, in our case, a mold. And they can range in various sizes from half a gram or a gram all the way to, well, as big as we want it, in the size of bigger than a quarter. And so that's Callets, chips, and drops. That's what I've heard as far as the industry's used so far, but I think there's probably a few more. Next one, milk chocolate and dark chocolate. So we in craft chocolate have coined the term dark milk, and that's because it's still on the darker side for what chocolate would normally be considered as a percentage, but not enough milk powder in there to legally call milk chocolate. And I don't remember the exact percentage. It's either 12% or 15% of that chocolate bar needs to be milk powder in order to call it a milk chocolate. So we'll double check that one and put in the notes at the bottom of this what it actually is. But dark chocolate, to me, this is my own definition, is 70% and above. I think the industry looks at it more in the form of 55% and above. But keep in mind, if it's 55% chocolate, that means almost half of that bar is not chocolate. So to me, that's just not very dark. That's a lot of sugar in most cases. That'd be 45% sugar. So now, let's jump into a percentage. When you see a percentage on a chocolate bar, and this only started happening, I think, in the mid-90s with Scharfenberger started putting percentages on bars, and then DeMori started putting percentages on bars. I don't know who did it first. Either way, it was kind of in the mid-90s or early 90s maybe. And what it's telling you is how much chocolate's actually in your bar. And so the easiest way to think of it is nibs. If it says 70% dark chocolate, that means you can think of 70% as nibs. However, that can also include added cocoa butter, which Manoa chocolate does as well. So in our recipe, we would add 10% additional cocoa butter, which means if we have a 70% dark chocolate bar, 60% is nibs, 10% is butter, and 30% is sugar. So it's a little deceiving because the butter that came from that nib as well is counted in that percentage that's on that bar. Milk chocolate, you don't tend to see a percentage on it because there's such a small amount of chocolate in there. Most people wouldn't even put it on the package. Craft chocolate tends to do that, but in our milk chocolate recipe, we have 30% nibs, 20% butter. And the reason we have to add that much cocoa butter is because there's 30% sugar, but mainly 20% milk powder. When you're adding that milk powder, your chocolate becomes so viscous that if you don't add that additional butter, that additional fat content, it's not going to flow. And so that's a 50% milk chocolate, and that's on the high side. So that's dark chocolate and milk chocolate and percentages. Now, single origin, single estate, and single varietal. So a single varietal, think of wine in this case. It would mean a Pinot Noir, or a Chardonnay, or a Malbec, right? Now, in cacao's case, it's a Nacional, or it's a Melanado, or it's a Trinitario. These are still vague, and I don't like using varietal names because I don't understand it all that well, the genetic side of it. And a lot of cacao is hybridized. It means it's just been cross-pollinated a lot of the time, and what we call Trinitario isn't exactly Trinitario, but I'll delve a little deeper into this. Trinitario is a Forastero and a Criollo that were then crossed on the island of Trinidad. And I think that what we now think of Trinitario isn't, I think there's a lot of other varietals or a lot of hybridizing that has occurred, and it's not just those two anymore. Single estate is when it's coming from one estate. So the cacao that we purchase from Costa Esmeraldas came from Costa Esmeralda's cacao farm. And it is a single varietal. It's one varietal, 3 clones of this one varietal called Neo Nacional. So in this case, it is a single estate, single varietal cacao that we purchase from them. And it would also be considered a single origin. And a single origin is more all-encompassing. A single origin means that the cacao came from Ecuador. A single estate means the cacao came from Ecuador from that single estate. Right? I think we all followed that one. Now, let's do one more. Refining, grinding, and conching. These words are thrown around a lot, and they're ambiguous. So, when you think of refined cacao, we have a machine called a pre-refiner. We run our nibs through a machine that's got these steam rollers. There's 2 of them on the top. They're very close together, and 2 right below that are very close together. The nibs go through and they get smashed, and then they go through the next set of rollers and refine even further. So to me, this is a refiner. However, all it means is you're refining the cacao. It can be in a stone grinder and getting smashed that way. That's refining. Grinding is the same thing. We're grinding the cacao up, whether it's with stones or, it could be anything. You could be smashing it with a rock and you could be grinding it. So that's refining and grinding. Conching, you often hear the stone grinders referred to as conches or melangers. I think that's just the French word for grind. I should double check that one as well. But conching, these machines are doing it by default. What conching means is you're introducing oxygen into the chocolate after it's already been turned into chocolate for the most part, or just already been crushed up. And this oxygen that's being infused is causing a volatilization, meaning there's a burning off, an off-gassing of mainly acetic acid, and acetic acid is vinegar. So there is an off-gassing of vinegar, and that's helping to balance the chocolate. By conching the chocolate, you are adding a balance of flavor by using oxygen and getting rid of compounds you don't want. So that's conching, and that's happening by default. It's not controlled or on purpose in the stone melangers, but that is also happening. So I like to think of the stone melangers or the stone grinders as refiners instead of conches, but it is conching because there is a lot of air getting whipped in there and vinegar is burning off. So that was another episode of Confusing Chocolate Terms. There are more of them. We will do this again. See you next time, and happy chocolate making.